Thanks for tuning in to the World XP podcast. If you're enjoying the content, please drop us up, drop a like, and let us know your thoughts below in the comments. Also, please consider supporting our podcast via the link below. It really helps us out.
Robbie, he's back. Last time he was here, he was a deacon, and now he's a priest. Congratulations, sir.
Thanks, man. It's good to be back. Good to be a priest. It's crazy. It's good.
So, for those listening, Robbie and I probably meet up for lunch once every 6 months or so and just talk for like 18 hours. No, more like 2 or 3. And just talk about all things in the world. And once in a while, we have recorded them and put them on the internet. And this is round 2. One of the reasons why I was like, Robbie, you need to come back because I have questions. And we had just touched on this beforehand, and I feel like it'll segue into all the other points that we had talked about. But you had mentioned something about, we were talking just the state of people nowadays, and you mentioned something about pride and the thinking of that you know what's best for you. And the idea that I had immediately following that was, well, isn't there some sort of level of confidence? Where does the level of pride being one of the seven deadly sins comes into like confidence versus arrogance, right? Because you want to be confident in your life, and that's a good thing, generally speaking, right? It helps you interacting with people and okay, I have my idea and I'm like believing in my idea, and that's a good thing. But where like the line between arrogance / pride in that negative way and confidence in the positive way seems to be so blurry that lots of people even step on both sides. Sometimes they're one side, sometimes the other side. And that was the idea that I had. And I was like, well, we should just start because I feel like this will be interesting.
Yeah. No, right, because like each person has to have an understanding of like who they are and actual trust of themselves, or else they end up just being like doing nothing with their life, right? Like if they're like constantly worrying about like this decision or that decision, and then they could just kind of keep punting in all their life, like
paralysis by analysis.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So if you don't actually have the like trust in your own decision, then like certainty about your own like what we've thought about something so far, like yeah, like you're not gonna do anything great. You're not gonna do anything really out of the ordinary. You're not gonna change your life much, right? So like if your life is the same and you don't know like how to make it better or whatever, then at some point you're gonna have to pull the trigger, and if you don't know where you're aiming, then and you're never sure about like, is this actually the right thing? That is kind of pardon the bad turn of phrase, but like the leap of faith.
Yeah,
it's almost like it's a leap of faith, at least like of yourself, right? Like we have to have that of like, is this finally the right and perfect car for me? Or like, hey, is this the person that I want to marry in my life, that I want to like promise to be faithful to for all of my life? Like at some point you gotta make that decision.
Yeah.
Then on the other hand, right, you can make yourself into your own little tyrant. Right? You can go the other way where you're like,
yeah,
I am right. I'm the smartest, best person in the world, right? And I think we all see that other one perhaps more clearly in opposition, right? Where my way or the highway, a lack of looking at other people's opinions, perhaps. Perhaps there has been good analysis, sure, but there's a surety in self without actual relationships with others, right? And so like, okay, both of these are like are errors that people make. What pride is in just like the kind of like classical definition, right? The pride that cometh before the fall, as the scriptures say, the pride that is described towards the Satan and the evil angels, the the pride that in some way lives in each of us is it's a belief that we're much better than we actually are, right? So better in our ability to make decisions, better in our actual like overestimation of my knowledge, overestimation of my abilities. Like an easy example of this is like, if you're not a good skier or a mountain biker or whatever, like, and you go down a double black diamond, if you're prideful, right, and you overestimate how great you are, then you're gonna eat it, right? And ski patrol's gonna have to come out, and right, like it ends up pretty catastrophic in that way, right? And the same is true just with those like smaller decisions, right? If you overestimate, how good you are as a writer, and you don't need to revise your work, right? You can end up with a bad report, a bad review, all those sorts of things.
It's the same as Anakin in episode 3 when he's like, "You underestimate my power." It's the same, and that shows itself in pop culture, movies, etc., all the time. But it's so glaring often in that way that we don't see it in ourselves. I feel like sometimes, like, even somebody prideful would look at in that movie and be like, "Well, that was dumb."
Right.
But then you get in the situation and you still do it.
Right. Oh man. And I mean, right. And so like, I mean, a lot of that requires just like reflecting a lot on your life, who you are as a person, where you are, even like, are you tired that day, right? And is that why, like if maybe you can't be as nice or like be able to like have this conversation right now with your spouse because you need a cup of coffee before you have that conversation to really, okay, now I know I'm in a good spot where I can have this conversation and not make it blow up. It's in the most like in the grandest sense of what pride is as well. If right, it's in relation to God, right? God is God, not me, not you. And when we put ourselves in his shoes, right, when we make our own rules, when we define reality by what I think as opposed to how it actually is, it's me taking the place of God. It's me, you can end up in some sticky situations because you like just want like make your own bad decision that you think is best, when in reality, it's not all true to reality. It's not at all true to your abilities, and developing the other virtues around it, like to actually like be humble, which is the opposite to pride, to like actually have a proper estimation of your own abilities, a proper estimation of who you are really, developing the other virtues that like support it. That's like that's absolutely good and necessary thing for like human to like be good. Yeah,
that's very interesting. You mentioned 3 things that kind of I had thoughts about. The first, I'll say the first one because I think it'll be the quickest, and then we can kind of segue using the other thoughts. But the last one, you mentioned humble, and often when you hear people describe somebody who they view as I'll use good loosely, but like generally positive, you hear things like quietly confident or humble but secure, or like there's always a balance of like both of these things. And that it's almost like you could almost replace that with just self-aware almost. Not entirely. It's not a like for like swap, but it's very interesting to me that confidence isn't really, and I've learned this as I've got older through exploring with conversations with you, confidence isn't necessarily just projecting it on everybody else. It's just staying true to who you are. But to do that, you have to know who you are, and then that's the part that takes all the time and the like. It's so annoying because you have to just be like, yeah, this part of me is shit, and I have to go change it.
Right,
Um,
right.
and that's never fun because you have to like take a piece of you away. And I was talking with another friend of mine, Will, who that episode will come out right before this one. It was like when I was a freshman in college. This is the example I use because it's very easy. I come from a situation where there were tons of like amazing people at the high school. I did fine. And I go to Mary Washington. It's a much smaller like pool generally, and I was like, wow, I'm great. And I told people that, and it was like had to take it on the chin. Somebody was like, hey, you should probably. That's really not good. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. But so I had to like take it on board. It took me a year or so to like get that out. But that was definitely a reflection on like, wow, one, I didn't necessarily realize I was doing it in that way, nor how it affected other people. And then it's like, then you get to the point where like, man, was this a case of that, or was this a case of? And then you start to like reflect on things that maybe stick around, and then you've got to sort through all that in your head, and then you've got to understand that like, okay, those things happened, and now I'm moving on with the understanding that I'm not going to do that anymore
Yeah.
because it affects people negatively. So that was the first one.
Yeah. Oh man, a couple of things. Okay. Humility and meekness. And I think like self-awareness is certainly it's under the umbrella of humility.
Mhm.
And I think in how we commonly use it, it kind of hits a lot of the things that are in humility. Right. It's an awareness of who I am, what I am in relation to other people. Right. And then meekness is more of that, how do I act in the world? Right. Meekness is knowing like, I can, I have like like when you're playing soccer with third graders,
Mhm.
you know, you're not trying to meg all of them, just, you know, 2 or 3, right? Yeah. You know, you're not going full speed, like you tone it back, right?
Mhm.
Like, because you have skill and power, but meekness is holding those things back, based on those certain circumstances. And part of that too might be in that moments where we recognize like, hey, I showing all of my power here, this is not the place. So
Mhm.
meekness is how we it describes how we act in the world, right? So
Mhm.
some of the greatest leaders have been humble, and then how they act in the world is meek. Huh?
So meek is kind of the manifestation of humility in the world, and humility is just your own trait that allows you to be meek-ish.
Right. And as people grow older and they figure out more of like, who am I? It's kind of funny because when you like I'm at a parish now that has a school. So I spend a lot of time in the school, you know, high-fiving the kids, all that fun, just, you know, saying good morning to everyone, all that fun. And it about 4th grade, like something like changes in the human person, right? Where they have this kind of greater awareness about who they are, and like maybe a little bit of discomfort about who they are. But up until that, like every single kid knows exactly who they are and exactly what they're about. Because they understand their very identity. You know, like you walk up to a kid and they say like, you know, who are you? You know, they'll say their name. And then I was like, well, how do you know? Like, well, you know, my family, my parents taught, right? Their entire understanding of their identity, of who they are, is in relation to other people, right? And I don't think that's a thing that necessarily changes as you get older, right? Because as children get older, as anyone begins to recognize parts of themselves that like they really don't like, that they like need to jettison, like they have to, like, I think that hurts, right? Because perhaps they've like made a part of this like hurt, or this like passing strength that they have. Like, I was a really good speller in 5th grade, and like if my identity is based around like that, and like, like you're not gonna you're gonna have a meltdown at some point when you realize like that is not who I am. And so then you also likewise, like, so you have that piece of you that you hate, that you need to get rid of, that hurts. Humility is just that recognition, like, whoa, that's not actually what I am, right? What I am, I think, is also still defined by understood, not necessarily defined, but most easily understood by your relationships with other people, right? Like, you just got married, right? So now, like, there's a part of who you are that's tied to your wife, right? So it becomes a new sense of your identity. You're not just, Eric, right? You're no longer a bachelor. You're married, right? It's a part of who you are. And so, like, humans are always going to understand themselves in relation to other people. That's just how we work. And I think the more isolated and like individualistic that people are, the worse it is for each individual person to understand who they are. Because then you're not defining yourself by the people that are actually close to you, people like your family, or the friends that are direct, or your community directly around you, like your neighbors, right? You define yourself based off of like a specific set of people that you follow on Instagram or whatever, and like you like put yourself all into those things which just aren't as real as the most essential parts of you. Gosh, yeah, there's a lot in there that you like, man, I could talk about that for that.
Yeah,
like,
there's so much in there, because
Yeah.
then you can split into the nuance of like, okay, to compare yourself to you, I just want to be a little bit better than I was yesterday. But then to measure, there's certain things that you cannot measure. Like, let's just take like mile time, for instance, right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to measure, okay, I'm 5 seconds faster than I was yesterday. But then if you take that over time, and it's like, okay, well, what do you actually, like, why are you doing this? And then you get into, maybe mile time is not the greatest example, but at a certain point you have to measure yourself by your peers, or in whatever activity or whatever thing you're looking at. At a certain point you have to do both, but you have to set, it's weird because you have to measure it on both, but then you can't generate your own self-worth from the comparison with your peers, because there's always going to be somebody better. And so there's that like balancing of like, you can't measure your own life by Instagram. However, you can also attain to something that you see on Instagram in terms of a lifestyle or whatever. And that's a very tricky thing that I think the human brain is not fully, really, like myself included, we've not evolved to understand that yet, right? In the grand scheme of things, social media is very, very young. So I don't think we have figured out how to deal with that. And I'm tie this into the two thoughts I had on what you were saying earlier. And the first is that you mentioned, well, they're tied together, but the first is that you mentioned pride being cometh of the fall of.
Oh, yeah, pride cometh before the fall is
that one.
English, sure. Yeah.
And then pride also being when you think that your reality is only as you perceive it, not the underlying reality. And so that's where social media is starting to be how you perceive your own reality. And so people are not understanding, not even of their own fault, I would say. It's just the world that we've become accustomed to. And if you're not really thinking, like, this is not, I spend probably way too much time thinking about all these things, but as a society, I feel like, and you see this manifesting itself with the some of like the transgender stuff in schools, where like, no, I am this way because I say so, verse, and then people also are saying, well, we're going to be in a civil war, society is collapsing, blah blah blah, and all these things are just coming together at this, like, here we are now. So those are the other two thoughts that I had. And I don't, and then the other thing to really tie it all up to what we talked about earlier is I feel like that is a loss of like spirituality in a bit, right? You see people who are in this having these sorts of conversations are always touching on the spiritual side of things without really diving into a religion thing. And I think some of them maybe because of some of the negative connotations of religion, right? You can insert any religion you want, and there's negative things that people will say about it. So, but anyways, those are kind of my thoughts that are all wrapped into the one, which is so much there. So my bad.
Yeah, it's I mean, this has always been like a problem we've been talking about with social media, is the like hyper sectarianism that like you get, the like, you know, it's reinforcing what you already like, right? So you only follow the people you like and you don't listen to these people, and right, it's okay, there's definitely that aspect, but then as you start to like really buy into an idea, it just like, and like that's all you're consuming, right? That's all of the like, and you're consuming more through social media or just any sort of media rather than like reality, then yeah, you're gonna end up in a
that becomes your reality.
Yeah, you're gonna end up in a fairy world though, because it's not actually how things are.
Correct. And then you act as if that is the reality that exists.
Right.
And then that's where the conflicts happen between people being like, no, this is my reality and this is your reality. You hear people say, tell your truth. It's like, okay, fine. You have your story, but also like, and we used this analogy before. If I punch you in the face, you still got punched in the face. Like, I can say, well, I didn't think that I did it, or whatever.
Well, we can also change the categories and describe how that happened, right?
Sure.
So then it becomes a whole other like, so we're just gonna like throw away our ability to communicate and speak about the same things together, like I can
manipulation of language,
right? And evolution like of categories as well. Like I can distinguish new categories where maybe for a second I just kind of like was happy that you punched me, because maybe I was like kind of self-loathing and I knew like I needed to be in the, maybe it wasn't like, so then, if I think of things in my world in this way, and I have a category now to describe it, if it's not a true category, then it's not helpful and actually distorts what's really going on, right? Categories are helpful. Categories are amazing, right? Like categories of between pride, humility, and meekness, right? Like good things. Categories are wonderful. But yeah, when we just kind of create categories that don't actually speak about what the thing is, that don't that justify us afterwards, then I mean, we're making that category out of pride because we're trying to like justify ourselves and say like, no, what I'm doing is good, and here let me explain, let me like make the reasons why, right? I mean, the moral theology, like ethics, how to speak about the human person and our actions, I mean, has existed for 4,000 years, and to not utilize that and not utilize the like intellectual tradition and to like grow in a mastery of our what people for thousands of years have been studying and developing and like curating, to like just kind of throw that out the window is, you know, it's not smart, right? But that's like when you're creating new categories without looking at anything that like has been described about it before, like you're not actually like getting much help from like the trusty practice of old.
That's interesting. I had a feeling that pride would bring us to, like, that discussion would bring us to this. I didn't see how you connected it coming. That's quite interesting, that when you make your own category up of whatever, then that's kind of just pride manifesting itself. I also do want to caveat one thing before people are saying I'm being insensitive. But I don't, if you're an adult and you want to think you're the other gender, I don't care. This is not really, it's not really a an indictment on these people. It's just the pushing of the concepts and that rather than the individual, like, thought experiments. I want everyone to be happy, and that's okay. Caveat, disclaimer, done. But I'm going to go on that connection between pride and maybe the rise of more secular, maybe even just lack of spiritual things in society, because there's people that are often, meditation is being, if you look in the right places, people are starting to meditate a lot more. People are starting to do yoga a lot more. I feel like is getting pushed in positive ways. The benefits of these things, right? People are talking about, even from a sciencey perspective, like do you know Andrew, the Huberman Lab?
I don't know that.
He's like a neuroscientist that works at Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
And he does stuff on like benefits of heat exposure, cold plunges, yoga, meditation, all these like these different habit things, how dopamine, and he gets into the real sciencey stuff. But there's this push for these things that were grounded back in ancient times in a very, very spiritual sense, that have come back, and like it feels like people are missing that a little bit, and so they're trying to like touch at it without being religious necessarily. And I feel like that goes with the pride kind of is sprinkled, not necessarily in these people who are trying to do it because they're trying to get themselves back on track. They understand that they've got stuff they got to work on, et cetera, but pride as a society versus like there's some sort of thing there, and I can't really quite put my finger on it.
I think like humanity is innately spiritual. How do we like one kind of easy reason is because, I mean, and when I say spiritual, it's a lot more closer to like actual life than people like think. Like they think they're only being spiritual when they sit down and have their meditation time and fine. I mean, yeah, that's certainly an aspect of it, right? And it certainly is good for the human person. Yep. But I mean, spirituality is like how we live and act and make a lot of choices in our life. Anything that pertains to our ability to transcend ourselves, both in ideas and then made it in action. I mean that's spirituality, right? To like believe that humanity is good, right? Okay, there's a spiritual idea that you're holding now, and your actions reflect that. And I mean, man is humanity, right? Is meant to make a like to engage in that spirituality. And I think a lot of the problems of kind of like our generation is that because in many ways we're hyper individualistic, we have a really limited spirituality.
Go on that.
We don't we basically are limiting spirituality to inside of our own heads, and perhaps even just inside to our own phone. We really lack the ability, and this is absolutely reinforced by the culture, to transcend ourselves. For example, Taylor Swift's latest album.
She has a new album. Oh,
Come on,
jeez.
get with it. Get with it. I don't. This is fruit of a conversation with a friend. Well, mostly just me stealing it from him, this idea from him, but that she's had the same problem for as long as she's been making music.
But it's more breakup songs than.
It's more breakup songs. Like, yeah, she finally kind of does realize, like, it's me, I'm the problem. Yes, but it's like it's all of the same problems, and she doesn't ever. It's all about things in her own life. Like, all of her music is about things in her own life, about problems that are in her own head, problems that directly relate to her, and she doesn't actually, like other songwriters, right, of years past, ones that perhaps that are better. She makes no references to outside of her own experience. So if she has, like, she doesn't make any allusions to like broader things necessarily in the culture, to things like the Bible, right? Which, I mean, really great songwriter, like Bob Dylan did a whole lot, right? Even to the great Greek epics, right? There's no. It's purely just bound up in her own experience, and I think that's where a lot of people in our generation are, where they have these ideas that are hyper specific to themselves, and the farthest that they can reach, the farthest that they can see of their both own human possibility, of their, like, to what degree can I develop myself as a human person in virtue, and then also to, like, what is out there. It's tiny. Our worlds, as connected as they are now, they've become far, far smaller, and our ability to transcend ourselves and to actually be in any sort of relation with the most effective parts of spirituality are completely limited, because, again, it's just, if it's all about me, then, you know, and it's all about my experience, and I just think about myself all the time, I don't look at what's happened in the past in human history, then I'm not gonna like develop in that.
See, this is quite interesting to me, because you see a lot of people our age that are, I'll say, very concerned with something like climate change or Ukraine, right? So it seems like they are caring, but then at the same time, you have people that are gluing themselves to a painting whenever, I think it was a Van Gogh or something, but it's like,
with the tomato sauce on it, and
yeah. So it's like, that's confusing to me, because tweeting about it doesn't really do it. It doesn't do anything. One, and two, is this obviously speaking in generalizations, but is this let me show everybody that I'm caring for something so I can be a good person, so I can feel better about myself, versus like it feels like it's caring with selfish intent.
yeah. I mean, in some way, like, sure, it could be like virtue signaling.
But I want to go past the, like, virtue signaling is like,
personally,
yeah, that's fine. Like, people can say that, and people do that, and they say things, and they've got their hashtags and whatever.
Yeah.
But, like, for on a deeper level, right? Because you can say people want a virtue signal because they don't want they don't want to get canceled. But I'm talking about, like, one step. Like, why do they feel like they're going to get, like, what about, let me figure out how to formulate this. It's like, because there's a fear, it's like a superficial fear of, like, if you get canceled by, like, like, if I get canceled, I'll just go work somewhere else. Like, but then there's a certain set of people where it's like they're in this kind of, they're famous, but they're not famous enough to, like, continue to, they're not, like, Rogan, you can't really cancel Rogan. But then there's that group of people below, that those are the ones that are, say, virtue signaling. And then you've got the people that are just regular people that, like, nobody, like, it's like, people don't really care that much, honestly, if some guy tweets the Ukraine flag, or somebody, like
Right.
At least in my experience anyways. So there's a reason past that where it's like, for what, almost. And also for the Ukraine thing specifically, the people that are doing that, this is way tangent and we don't have to touch on this, but the people that are doing that are absolutely beyond me, because, like, do you have no understanding that Putin feels threatened? He has nukes. He said he's going to use them, and we're like, yes, we want to give Ukraine more weapons. You know what happens when you give a country at war more weapons? More people die. Think, like, just think about it. Like, sorry,
Yeah.
that's a pet peeve of mine. That it's just one step removed. Like, why would you want to give a country at war more weapons if you're concerned about the people's lives? More weapons equals more people dying.
Yeah.
Anyways, but
It's a whole complicated other.
yeah. I just,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Anyways, that's a different. Anyways, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm no means because, like, yeah, I think there's an aspect of, like, yes, we should want to be in solidarity, and, like, you know, like, I stand with Ukraine. I'm like, you know, I stand with, you know, whoever, right, about this thing, and, like, I can, like, tweet into this echo chamber. And I think a lot of people do that just because, like, okay, they see the tweet and they're like, wow, this is bad. I want to, like they feel that there's some need of self-expression. And in some, I mean, this is where, I mean, the, like actual relationship is kind of, like, a little bit out of the window, because, like, if you know, you mailed a random letter to a person in Ukraine and it said, like, I stand with you, and, like, you mail the letter, right? Like, they receive this letter in the mail and they're like, what the hell is this? Like,
it's more of a, oh, that's nice, put it down, let me go pick my gun back up.
Right. And it, like, it's missing the, like, actual human relationship that's there. So, like, I mean, that's what, like, Twitter is made off of. It's made off of, like, this, like, quick ability to, like, to communicate about something. And so I think and it's not necessarily meant to be, like, in an actual close relationship, which is that's if like if we interact with the whole world, like, via Twitter, like, we're not going to be good at actually having good, like, deep human relationships.
No.
If we approach the world like we approach Twitter, and I mean, some of it too is, like, some of it's just, like, not our business. I mean, like, I pray for Ukraine, pray for, right, peace in all the world. I don't follow the war too closely, right, and keep, like, super close track of that, because, you know, I mean, doesn't other than through social media, and I don't really see any way in which this affects my day-to-day life and the people that I deal with, and the people that I work with and love every day. Some of them, yeah, sure, they have family that's in the military. Some of them, yes, are Ukrainian. Great. It really affects them. And then it affects me. But I mean, likewise, I mean, in the Dominican Republic, there was a gigantic storm surge, and, like, something like 11 people died. Fact check that number, it's wrong, but it's like, right, like, whoa, you know, the big natural disaster in the Dominican Republic, not on the news at all. But like, one of my friends here, she has family there, and she's showing me these videos, and like, this is something I'm gonna like emotionally and like invest myself in and like be a part of, because like this actually relates to me and a human person that I know and love, and people that they know and love, and like because of that, I care. And like there's a reality of like what's in my lane and what's like way out there. Like I don't have super well developed thoughts on candidates for, you know, the next presidential race, because
Oh God, that would take
I
another
know
18.
that's a whole other let's step back to politics, man. Just because like I don't know, like it's outside of my lane.
Yeah, I didn't mean to
Most
put us. I
most
didn't
things
mean to
that
put us into that. I just needed to get
yeah
that
yeah.
out there.
But
Yeah.
right, again, it's like that echo chamber, so that again, and like I can be torn in a lot of different ways in a lot of different places, and like thinking about all these things that necessarily don't actually matter to me and who I am and what I need like to be a better person in my life.
Mhm.
Uh yeah. And that's a pretty general problem that people have, where uh, as a priest, hearing confessions, that people struggle with becoming really worked up over news and things that are happening in the world that are way bigger than them, that maybe they shouldn't be as worked up about. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this then? So if people, we've got this. So I'll frame it, and we've got this hyper individualistic culture, and people are seeing unattainable things, places, and they feel like, maybe speculating, they have to be worried about something big to attain said unattainable thing. And to focus on that takes it away from focusing on, right, the parts that we have to jettison, like we were talking about earlier. And to do that, to focus on the parts of you that you have to jettison, you have to take responsibility. When you focus on something huge, there's a certain element, I feel like, of
Way
well,
easier
you know,
yeah.
I'm not actually responsible if Putin hits the red button.
Right.
Like, it's not my fault. But if I care about the big thing, I'm still caring about something to give my life meaning. But it's like, it's shallow. It doesn't. You could exchange whatever big issue, right? This is going to happen. It's starting to happen with climate change, right? We went from COVID to climate change, and then there'll be then it's Ukraine, and then it'll be something else. And it doesn't actually, people just care about whatever the next thing is.
Yeah.
But in order to have the hyper individualistic, you need to be taking a lot of responsibility for, like, I don't think there's something inherently wrong with the individual, like individualism and like freedom to do what I want or you want, like the libertarian quote approach, as long as you have somebody that's going to take responsibility for themselves, their immediates, like family, close friends, and then the community, as right, those three that I talked about with Will on the last episode and that you just mentioned, right? Like, Ukraine is not in those three things. And so I don't know, what are your thoughts on that sort of framing of, especially the responsibility aspect?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of times people use big world events, problems of other people, as a great way to distract themselves from what they actually need to be working on in themselves. Right? Like it's way easier to, as our Lord says, right, to like point out the splinter in someone else's eye when you're not actually dealing with the beam in your own eye. Right? And yeah, so I mean, people get just super, and I think we're also at the point in our individualistic culture, right, where it's, I think, yeah, like we have this reality of personal autonomy. I can make my own decisions, but when the very principles which make something good or bad become individualistic, then we really no longer have a society, right? So if we are individuals who take responsibility and we all have the same sort of principles, which guide like our responsibility, guide like what we think is good, what we think is bad, then yeah, then that's a level of individualism which is good, huh? If it's an individualism which says like whatever I get and whatever makes me the most money, that's my principle of living, and I don't care about you, then that's
it gone too far.
Yeah, and that's a type of making that sort of principle of what is good and what is bad. That's a manifestation of pride. Right? It's me saying, well, this is how the world is, and this is what's actually good, as opposed to, well, not like this is what I mean in the social sense, what we all agree is good. In the historical sense, the like what throughout history people have said is good. In the theological sense, it's what God made each thing to be, and like how he made that to actually flourish. Yeah. And I think
go on that. Tie those two in, the individual of like the standpoint of when people have the same like principles, and then God, the last part you said about in the theological sense, because I feel like that's where we can wrap this up, or wrap this particular portion up quite nicely with the individualism. It's like it's good when everybody has the right, good from the sense of it's much better when the culture is homogeneous versus like some guy from here and some guy from there, and then the cultural values don't mix, and then it becomes not like I don't care about you because you don't have the same principles as me, but I care about this other guy because we went to the same church or whatever.
Yeah.
Go on that a bit. I think there's something there.
Yeah. One way to transcend yourself, to like have a bit of authentic spirituality, is to look how far can this thing actually take me? Huh? If I subscribe to, Joe Rogan as my like source of spirituality, my source of ideas, my source of belonging, then okay, I'm limited to whatever Joe Rogan thinks and whatever he reads, and right, so okay, a little bit bigger net, but not as big. If I think that I'm a tiny speck in the universe, and somehow the universe, like this word which describes the amalgamation of all of things, then again, okay, it's pretty broad. We made up a word to describe some sort of possible sentient being, which is apparently doing something only when it's good for the most part. Or we can actually, and this is the uniquely Christian idea, is that we can actually have a relationship with the God who makes all things, creator of the heavens and the earth, creator of you, without beginning or end, always existing, right? He is not just like, he's not a being, just as we are a thing, but he is being itself. Right? Like the if you want to look for like, okay, how, like, what is the greatest and possible spirituality? It's something which actually taps into that greatest and highest being. Right, like the Christian, like other religions try to do this as well, right? Of like, okay, like that's religion in general tries to connect us to God, who is the greatest and highest being, who breaks us out of our hyper individualism, gives us a communal set of principles, right? Typically, which is what God has shown us. This is how we're supposed to live.
The commandments, etc., stories in the Bible.
This is how you're, even in other cultures and religions too, like this is how you're to offer sacrifice to me. This is how the world works. All that. Then you also have, so you're right, you got those like shared principles you have, and perhaps also this promise also from God, sure, of like, eternal life through it. The unique Christian spin on this is that like it's not us trying to claw our way up the ladder to get outside of ourselves to find God, but that he's the God who has found us. Because like basically whenever like we choose the wrong thing and we go against what's good for us as people, we spiritually push ourselves away from God and we misalign ourselves with his principles. And so in our waywardness, our like in all of our bad decisions, and our misconceptions about the world, he's the God who's come to find us. He's the God who in Jesus, that's what Jesus was, God who became man, taught, established a church, and suffered and died for our sins. Okay, ascends back to heaven, has his church on earth here. He's the God who has come to us and has said, this is the way in which you will flourish. This is the way in which you will be happy. The perfection of this would be the things like the Beatitudes, right? Like blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God, right? Like Jesus telling us what it like if you want to be happy, if you want to actually have a spirituality that's connected to the greatest and highest being in the world, to a God who loves you and a God who's come to find you, here's how you're gonna do it. And boom, like you now understand yourself in relationship to God, right? Permanent being, perfect being. You have a community of other people who can help you to grow in the common ideal, and you have a lot of really good reasons, especially since we're right roughly 2,000 years after Jesus Christ, and there's a lot. There's more than I could ever read in my life of good writings that have been produced by Christians that describe the human person and how to be good, who God is, how we can best cooperate with God. I mean, all of that is there's just way more on that in the tradition of the church that that people even think to realize. Yeah, I don't know where we ended up there, but
That's very interesting to me because in religion generally, if you want the individual to have a relationship with God, there's almost a certain aspect of it goes back to this balancing thing again. It's like what you have to be acting in such a way that is beneficial for yourself and those around you, because you can't go so far to the individualistic side that then it becomes prideful. But then you also run into the thing that is human beings and who are flawed. And so you run into like, and this happens right with both religion, right, the early onset of Christianity, the early onset of the United States of America, how the Constitution was written, and all of these things. There's like a shelf life on all of these, not these things that are run by humans on Earth, where eventually humans are so not not ideal for this sort of thing that things will just start to crumble because you have people who are not good at heart. They have bad intentions. They are incompetent.
Yeah.
They are insert any negative thing. And so then you end up, I think that's almost half or a piece of the reason why we've ended up in this individualistic thing, because people look at the US right now and they're like, well, Nancy Pelosi's been doing insider trading. Why should I care about what Congress is doing? Why should I go vote? Why should I do this and participate in do my civic duty when it doesn't matter anyways, because yada yada yada. And so I'll just focus on me. And then so they're like, I don't know. I feel like is I don't know. What are your thoughts on that as well? Well, I let me caveat one more thing. I think with all that said, then you have to go to, if you're going to be individualistic, you still then have to, the more individualistic you have to go in a way that would manifest itself in a good way, you still have to take more responsibility on for yourself. The more that you are counting on you, the more you have to be responsible for you. And so we can't have our cake and eat it too, where we're like, well, you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm not going to participate in anything in the community, but also I want the community to do everything for me. It's like, okay, it doesn't really work. You can't do that.
Right.
However, when the community is not doing anything for you anyways, then it's like we're in this weird sort of give and take, and I think it goes that way with religion as well. So many people are disenchanted with religion. I think you've seen the rise of, when we were looking for officiants for the wedding, we only talked to a handful, but all of them use this term spiritual but not religious, and I hadn't heard that term until 6 months ago, 8 months ago, and I assume it's been around for a little while. But that's, I would think, a relatively new term, because it's the same concept with the government. It's the same concept with religion. People are like, why do I need this priest or this rabbi or this whoever who's a flawed human to help me do XYZ? Why can't I just do it? And then the same cycle comes back around. It's like, okay, well, if you're going to do that, you have to take the maximum amount of responsibility on for yourself. If you're not going to have somebody who, like, it's your job to help people have a relationship with God, if we're going to like boil it all the way down, essentially. So if I'm not going to count on you, then I have to take full responsibility on for myself. And if I don't do that, then I can't be like, well, the priest didn't help me. Well, yeah, you didn't go to him anyways. I don't know. It's very but it goes with, I think we've lost the sense of community a little bit as well. But I think, I don't know, there's a lot there too.
I think when you take on all of that personal responsibility, when you bring on this individualism, you can end up one of two extremes, and anywhere in between, or flip-flop between the far extremes. Yeah, right. One is complacency, because if you're the one deciding your principles, you're like, you know what, it's okay that I treat people terribly, like a sort of Karen figure, like I'm the law, you can be okay with being a terror on the world, right? Loosely speaking, right? But this is you can define and just completely accept yourself and really just lower your standards, right? If you're making the standards and you feel bad that you're not meeting the standard, well, just lower the standard, and now you're okay, right? Okay, so there's one problem with individualism, because then, I mean, in reality, right? Like if I'm really bad at, so you can end up really complacent in that way, and the complacency is by a changing of the standards for your own benefit, because because a lot of people don't want to actually have and take that responsibility for, well, actually, in reality, and in maybe perhaps even what I intended to do, I didn't meet the goal. And they're afraid to confront the fact that they're a failure.
Yeah, fear of failure is...
Yeah. And if you're not, that's not being humble, right? Being humble is recognizing and having a proper estimation for what you are and what you've done, right? I'm a failure because, I failed, this exam, right? The exam gives me a proper estimation of who I am, right? I failed the test. So, I'm either going to write it off and I'm going to, say, well, maybe it was rigged or whatever, right? The other way that people can take it is a sorrow or depression. I didn't meet the goal.
We see that a lot now. Depression rates are through the roof.
Yeah. And final acts following depression as well, also, right? Like, yeah. and again, it's a other aspects in which, yeah, sure, that's related to individualism, but it's you can end up just in depression because you don't know how to deal with being a failure, right? I would say that perhaps Christians are the best failures. I mean, I'm a walking failure. I'm very aware. I went to 6 years of seminary, and by golly, I can really well describe a lot of my problems. And I'm, when I really do take the time, at the end of each day to like, how did I do today? If I'm just on my own and I have to carry that responsibility myself, I will literally be crushed. In a place of sorrow, in a place of depression. I think that's part of. I mean, that's one of the new, like, as a priest, I hear confessions, right? So people come to the priest to confess their sins, receive God's forgiveness, and it's the most beautiful and freeing thing for Catholics who, I mean, truly recognize, yeah, like this is an encounter with God where he's actually forgiving them, where he's giving them the help, right? Like they can't make up for their sins because like they've, to an extent to which they can't repay, hurt God, hurt what he's made us to be, fallen short of what he's called us to be. But in his love and mercy, he's there to say, no, it's okay. Listen, try again. And so the Christians become really good at failures because we fail all the time. And our God keeps telling us, listen, like, I'm going to help you. Like, learn how to use my help well. So that way you can try and sometimes fail again and again and again. But always, again, like not losing sight of that best and final end of the human person. I did that thing again where I just kind of ended up in this other thing.
Yeah, you do that sometimes. That's okay though. Can you steelman a lot of people, and the term, there's like these, I hate these terms because people use them, whatever, but like the red pill or manosphere. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, this is the like from the Matrix.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's these guys that are in this sort of space where they're like, nobody's helping you, like nobody's gonna help you. You have to take responsibility, like fix your life, go like do,
Oh,
and
okay.
then some of them end up with like, don't get married because the marriage system is messed up, and if you get divorced, the woman's just gonna take half your stuff, and some of them end up there, which I don't agree with, obviously, because I just did it. But but can you steelman just not the marriage portion, but can you like sort of, I want you to steelman both that part and then the flip side of needing community, what religion provides, like those sorts of things. So so the first one, the messaging of nobody's going to help you, you've got to take on all the responsibility that might, like you said, right, we both understand that that's generally too much for one person, but can you like sort of steal, because I think people have become very disenchanted with authority generally, and so that's this kind of, can you steelman that part, and then we'll go to the other part as well.
Yeah, I mean, some people rightfully so. Sure, I mean they're priests who've done terrible things. And because they were this, all the worse, right? And so like that, like lack of that, like distrust of authority is, it's sad, and I think in some cases warranted, but also, I'm not him, right? It's right. It's like to put someone in the same category as that is unfair. But to be cautious, okay. fine. But build the actual human relationship with the person.
Of course, but just like
yeah.
we'll get
And
to
then,
we'll get to the flip side, but just like the
yeah.
messaging of distrust of authority, you have to take on all the responsibility. Nobody's coming to help you.
Mhm.
Well, can you steelman that? And then we'll go to the flip
Yeah.
side where
No, I think in some communities that actually can be true. Huh? And that can be, I mean, absolutely true to some people's experiences in life. In that family and friends just leave them on their own, and if they don't make it on their own, then they're not going to make anything. Huh? And that, I mean, certainly is a breakdown of a community, right? Like a community is meant to be there for each other. I mean, that's what like. I mean, that's what the church is, right? The church is a community of faith that like people that actually like love and care about each other, looking out for each other's good. And I think sadly a lot of these people that are like really vocal about that, like individualistic, like either you do it or it's never going to happen. Like it's like you're never. Like no one's going to be there for you ever. I think a lot of times they're just speaking from a personal wound. They're speaking from a place of hurt in their own past, which is something innate that because what they're lacking is actual trust in other people, and so they've realized the only thing that I can trust is myself. Loop the conversation back to everything else we've just talked about so far about trusting in yourself.
Yeah. So then the flip side, you steelman the portion of right. We want to find a community of those around us that will, right, do basically what religion would provide from in Christianity. You hear the term fellowship used.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's the best parts of that would be like kind of touch on. I've experienced it. You've obviously experienced it as well. Like the sort of feelings that you get when you enter into a community where everyone is principled in that way, and there's the trust between everybody is there. Like what sorts of things, like if somebody was to walk into some like one of these, I don't trust anybody except myself. Like if you were to convince them, be like, no, you should really come over here with us. Like what would you say?
It's like family. Some people may not have a great experience of family, right? So like, let's basically just explain like what is a good family, right?
So
these
what
people
is?
actually, huh?
Yeah, never mind. Keep going.
Yeah. Like a good community is like a good family. It's clear why everyone is there. They're there first because they love others, like because they're like looking for others. And then second, because as like an accident, almost, it's like, because it's good for me, right? Like I go to hang out with my friends, like so my friends that I might call family, right? Like I go to hang out with them because I love being with them and I love what they have to say and I love being around them. I feel like I can just be myself around them, right? So similarly, it's like being with good friends and family. Similar ideals, similar mission in mind as well, right? So we all have like a general like collegiality, general like friendship amongst everyone, and we're all oriented towards the very same sort of thing, and perhaps even practice and do some of the same things to do that together. So I mean, like it is the point where like, yeah, I could text a bunch of people in our Hispanic Grupo de Oración and like, yep, they would jump right to it to help someone else that's in need. And there is that like actual like communal help. Can be messy, but is a thing I've completely experienced in my life and see happening all the time. And more than just selfish gain, but actual like selflessness. That's part of that. Like, I'm here because I love you, as opposed to like, I'm here to what I can get from you. huh? Like that's how really all human relationships kind of should be. But yeah, it's they shouldn't necessarily be self-serving, but focused on the other adult relationships, especially, right? Like mature relationships. Like I'm focused on how can I love you, as opposed to like what can I get out of you, like how can I use you? Like, yeah, we know that's wrong.
Yeah, I think that happens. Well, that lack of, I don't believe that you're there to help me just because you are, is because one, I remember in there'd be like movies that will be set in like the 50s or whatever, and
Yeah.
everybody knows everybody on their street, and you can
Yeah.
leave your door unlocked and blah blah blah. And now we're in a situation where people have lost, I think, their, I don't know what the psychological term is, but you have your immediate circle where it's like 7 people or whatever, and then you've got your next one, which is like 20 or whatever, and then you've got the one after that, which is like 150, or maybe it's like 10, 50, 150. I feel like people have lost the middle one of people that they like trust, and all those people have, instead it's like you've got your like 7 or 10, and then the outside one is now up to like 300 because you can connect with somebody on Twitter. And it's like you kind of trust them, but like if push comes to shove, you're not really gonna ask. You're not gonna be like, "Hey, man, like, can you come into my house and do whatever?" Like, you're not gonna do that. And then you're left with these like 5 people that are closest to you, and that's when you get people tweeting like, "Keep your circles tight," and like all these other things. And I just thought of that now. I don't, because I'm thinking about my own life, and I feel like that's kind of the case. It's like I have my very, very close like 7 or 10, and then I don't really have people that go. Then I have like people that I would like acquaintances, I guess, or whatever.
Colleagues.
And it's like we're friendly and we might see each other out, but like if I really need something from one of those people, I don't expect it to be like, I don't expect them to be there.
Right.
Whereas before, I feel like
Can't actually have the trust and
with
you can't
the
assume
next,
that like they're going to take responsibility for you because of the relationship you have.
yeah, and I feel like before you could not know somebody that well, but like you know them, they're in your neighborhood, like your kids play on the same soccer team, blah blah blah,
Yeah.
and people would just do that, like, oh, can you let my dog out? I'm gonna be gone. Yeah, sure, no problem.
Right.
And now, like, people wouldn't even think to ask. Because they're just expecting the answer to be no.
Right.
Almost. And
I think a huge part of that, and I think it's certainly more true in Northern Virginia, is the lack of or is the transiency. Like everyone's all over the place. You know, you might have a lease for this place for 2 years, and then you move, to another building, and like boom, totally new people. Yeah. And that's one thing that like in the church, like there are like, it's kind of doing the same sort of inventory. Like, all right, great, I got like my buddies from grade school that I'm still keeping in touch with, and like, all right, family, like, all right, cool, I got that inner circle. And then I was like, all right, like if I needed to like, hey, kid, like I left the gas on in the house, can you go in and turn it off? Like, who would I text for that? And like, yeah, like I know some of our neighbors here, like wherever we live, is they come to the church, and I've gone over to their house. Like they're like this sort of like kind of like the friend group you had in college, like of like, you're not like super tight, but like you enjoy your time together, and occasional favors and that sort of thing, and like and then everyone else and whatever, but and like some people also can get that from like like people at their gym or on their teams or whatever. I think you're bringing up another good point here of like people, because of other reasons, they're lacking that kind of middle community. Yeah.
And it's hard to reach out and try and create that because you can only do it so many
Weird.
times
It's almost
before
weird to do it.
well, it's weird, and then people are like, why do they just need something from me, or like, and then you get shut down a certain number of times, and you're like, why am I even bothering? And then it's this whole cycle that kind of just builds on itself, and it's, well, not very fun, to be honest.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that yeah, like you're exactly right. Of that, like everyone, you know how to make friends in first grade because you're like, we played Play-Doh together or whatever, or like
Play-Doh.
we became in friends in college because like
Yeah.
soccer, and it was like easy. But now, like, I don't know, like, hey, like, we just enjoy spending time together. It's like it is, yeah, kind of like almost weird now to like, hey man, you want to like get dinner or something? It's like, wait, like, what's he gonna talk about? What's like what does he need? Is he like, is Eric gonna ask me on his podcast? Like, what's going on? Like,
yes, I am going to do that. And here you are.
Right? Or like, oh man, is Father Renner, is he gonna like, it's like, I don't know, like ask for money? I don't know, like, or like, yeah. And to not, yeah. Again, that like probably comes from a place where people have been hurt and they haven't really been healed of that hurt. Yeah.
There are a certain subset of people though that I think, like, I've got one or two people that I would consider in like the middle one that I will absolutely trust to do something.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like you are the same, like you and I, we don't talk every day, but if I really, really, really needed something, like I would trust that you would do it. And I hope the same, vice versa, the same for me.
Yeah.
And so there are like, but to that point, all of the people that I'm thinking about that are in that group have been raised either in a religious or a strong family like environment, and I feel like that is also quite rare. So I want to kind of jump into the, if you meet somebody and you're like, hey, religion, specifically Christianity or Catholicism, is a great thing. I like go for that, because I think part of this community, right? People who come from like broken families or they don't have the best friendships or whatever, a religious community often can be a really good way to kind of not replace it, but act as a kind of substitute in a way, a little bit here and
Like a
there,
supplement,
right? Just supplement relationship with God is kind of can help with these sorts of things. And people who haven't or have had less than ideal experiences with religion in general, or like, how would you go about that? And you can also, right, knowing my backstory, you can also direct this at me if that would help
I'll
you do
kind
that.
of
But
generically in it.
yeah.
The desire of the human heart is to be known and loved, right? Like to be like you as a little kid, like, Dad, I want to tell you about my dad. I want to tell you about this thing, right? Like you want to like be known, huh? Of like, look at me, like, and if you feel unknown, then like, okay, like cue list of attention-seeking behavior, lack of self-worth, right? Like, okay, great. Loved, right, as well, or even sometimes even like if you're not experiencing love, right, like if the babies aren't being held enough, like there are problems, right? If parents aren't looking after and expressing their love for their child, right? If there's not like skin time, right, like between a child and his parent, then like, sure, okay, great. So like we can see it far more clearly also when you're older, like when you're unloved, like when you're like unloved, and then you feel like you don't matter. And so, okay, then you end up with a wound in your heart. You end up where like, I mean, this can even happen in like small things too. Like when I was in 8th grade, we did like an 8th grade class trip, and it was, the mid-2000s. So I was wearing cargo shorts, as you do.
Of
I was
course.
wearing, I don't know, like a Gap t-shirt.
Yeah, and a
then
pack of
a short
5
sleeve.
gum.
Yeah, yes. And then a short sleeve plaid, like button down, but it was like, unbuttoned, and I found a
T-shirt
belt.
under it. Yeah.
Yeah, the Gap Shoe t-shirt.
Of
And
course.
and I had a red belt, and so I tucked the shirt into so like you could see the belt, because it was like, it's a cool belt. And then one of my friends just kind of like,
What were we thinking?
right, and I'm thinking like, I'm cool, I'm stylish, I'm an 8th grader, this is cool. And then one of my classmates was like, one of my friends was like he really like just kind of threw it up, like, oh, nice belt. Like, insecure me is like untuck my shirt, like, okay, that's obviously not cool. And if I want to be cool, if I want to experience the love and admiration of my friends, then I need to like, and also like, maybe I'm never gonna like tuck my shirt in to like show my belt buckle ever again, right? Like from those places of hurt, it changes how we live and act. Healing is possible. Jesus Christ can heal you through this, through all of that pain. There's more than that. I mean, like the Catholic Church is, and also through the Jewish patrimony, has more data and description on who the human person is, how and what the human condition is. Like we've got the most on it, to be able to describe what's going on in the human person and what the problem is and how to fix it. I mean, the most important part of that actually just being God, and like actually like having being healed by the very God of the universe who made you, because like he's not happy when you're not as good as you could be, right? And he's like, even like, yeah, even maybe a little mad when we do like clearly bad things, right? It's quick to forgive though, and the way in which God wants us to be healed by him, to experience his love and mercy, is through his church, right? Like otherwise he would have stayed here the whole time, right? Like why in the world did Jesus leave? Right? Like he came down the cross, then he came back, and we're like, woo, we got him back. Awesome, isn't this great? Right? But like, why didn't he just stay with us? Like why did he have to leave again? Why did he have to go back, ascend into heaven? It's because he made a church. He made he had apostles that he sent out, who then appointed other bishops, who then made priests in the area, and it's because Jesus knows if it was just him, like he couldn't do the amount of work that the church is doing in the world. He needs us to be a part of it, to like bring healing to people, to like show them they're actually connected to something throughout the whole world, something that's also like to God himself, who's greater than the whole world. And I don't know, it's the reason why why in the world I decided to go to seminary, and become a priest. Like could have done a lot of other things, but people don't go to church anymore just because it's what you do. It's because like something has happened in their life, and that's something worth asking about. Yeah, I don't know, kind of rambly in there, but whatever.
No, it's good. That's interesting. I do have to wrap up in a bit. So on a less heavy note, how's your first 6 months, 8 months been?
Dude, it's insane. Like, a friend of mine was talking with a person and who's like thinking about becoming Catholic, and he's like, I don't know if I think God would want to I don't know, it was a good idea that God gave humans the ability to like do the sacraments and do priestly stuff. And like my friend and I like looked at each other and we're like, we agree. Like I'm a terrible person. Okay. Like, okay, I meet the qualifications. I'm not.
You do all right for yourself.
I do all right. But like, there's that responsibility, personal responsibility of like, no, I know how much better I could be doing in my life. Yeah, like the fact that like these good and amazing powers, like supernatural powers of like being able to do the sacraments to forgive sins, in God's name, to say mass, like to anoint the sick, to be with people in those like worst moments of their life and their best moments of their life. I mean, it's insane. But it's like it's what God made. It's like what God told us to do. So I'm doing it. But it's like I'm amazed at how many people cry because like they're just experiencing something immense in their life. Whether it's like on their deathbed, seeing the priest there to give them the sacraments, or in the confessional after like a, I don't know, recent rough period in their life, or in preparing for marriage and realizing like the ways in which they need to grow. Like a lot of people cry. And it's because they're experiencing something amazing in their life that I mean is like because God's grace is doing something. It's insane. I'm adjusting. I'm not biking as much as I should be. Yeah. How about you? You've been married for what, like 3 months now?
1.5.
1.5. All right.
Actually, to the day, 1.5.
Nice.
It's been good. It's been good, man. Like even in the beginning when you're like, "Oh, you're married now," I was like, "Yeah." No, it's been good, right? Because after we come back, we both are traveling for various things, and it's like been a whirlwind of stuff in the last like probably 2-3 weeks. We finally got a chance to like just be like, "All right, now, thank you cards."
Right.
But no, it's been good. I think we were in a really good position, I think, beforehand in terms of all the stuff that we like. None of the things that people are like, "Oh, have you thought about this?" It's like, "Yeah." Have you thought about that? It's like, "Yeah." We don't really have exactly the answer, but this is not news to us. Like, I'm sure you've talked with some people, and you're like, "Hey, have you thought about that?" And they're like, "We have to do that." You're like, "What?" Yeah. So I don't know. I think people are like, "Is it different?" It's like, yeah, of course it's different, but it's not. We're growing, and I think it's good. Communication is good. I'm very happy, honestly.
Yeah.
So,
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. It's freaking awesome.
All right, we should end on this happy note before we go back down the rabbit hole of darkness and nonsense.
Yeah. Oh man, there's
any last nickels?
Nah, man. Good to see you. Good to talk with you, man.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Cool. Always a good time. Next time I see you, I'll have to ask if you can come back on the podcast again. Cool. I'm just messing. It's a callback joke.
Welcome to my office. I'm like a professional priest now, so I have like my office.
Professional.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.
See you.